Welcome to Module 2, 4 Dimensions of Service Management. We'll be discussing 4 areas, which are organizations and people, information and technology, partners and suppliers, value streams, and processes. Again, we do want to emphasize always about the processes for the ITSM, and they do interact with one another. Okay. And for organization and people, we do need to have a formal organizational structure. Uh, this could be having a flat or two functional or two divisional, right? Culture is where you have the company culture as well and the individual culture of the people. Required staffing and competencies, you do want to hire competent people to be experts on the field so that you can basically handle problems and solve add more efficiencies to your current processes, right? Roles and responsibilities are important. If you clearly define the roles and responsibilities, people in the organization can do their work efficiently. So culture is essential part of an organization's success or failure, right? You do want people in the company to follow your organization's culture. Let's say if the company culture is customer obsessed and you hired someone who's not customer obsessed, so that's a misalignment, right? And also nowadays, you don't want to just only hire someone for culture fit, meaning they also value the same culture, but also a culture ad where they basically can improve the culture of the company and bring something new to the table, right? So considerations include, so you need to have trust, transparency, collaboration in shared values, right? Leaders who champion values, so not only for the managers or upper management, but you can also have a champion in the staff level who would promote and influence people to follow that culture. And coordination as well. An example would that be, let's say you do have a sales team and an inventory team, wherein the sales team, let's say they successfully got like 12 million orders of, let's say, Huawei phone, right? And the inventory team only has 5 million Huawei phone. So that itself would be bad because now there are 7 million customers who won't be getting their phones, and then they would be very unhappy and the reputation of the company is stake, and that is only due to inventory team and sales team not coordinating their information. uh, so organizational structure, there are common approaches. You have the functional structure where activities are grouped by their skills. Divisional structure where activities are grouped by customer region, product, or service. So let's say you have, let's say, USA team, China team, right? Europe team, and could be by product or service. Let's say a service for database team, right? Cloud database team or cloud computing team, right? Or maybe a cloud storage team. And if there's a mixture, we call that a matrix structure. And for IT, as you can see in the globe, a lot of different tech terms, all of them do belong to IT, right? Uh, Technologies are required to support the services. That's why there are IT enabled services. Most services do require technology, right? So we can't really uh, manage to have services without them. So the input and outputs of activities and practices, right? Information and knowledge necessary for management of services. So technology that support ITSM are the following. You have the workflow management, communication systems, inventory systems, mobile platform, cloud solutions, knowledge bases, analytical tools for monitoring, remote collaboration such as let's say video conferencing app, Slack, right? And also GitHub, online code repository. Then we have AI and machine learning. So Supporting services. So the first one is support the ITSM. This one is supporting the services, right? You have the IT architecture, database, blockchain, right? Useful for supply chain management, cognitive computing for human-based analysis, behavior analysis, applications, communications systems such as like say voice, right, phone system over the network, AI, and also cloud computing if the technology is outsourced. So things to consider: compatibility with current architecture and customer requirements, right? We do need an alignment, right? Any compliance or security issues, because that would basically hit the reputation of the company and also get fines and penalties. Future proof. You do want to have your systems to be extendable, that we can upgrade them if necessary, right? Um, just an example as well. For example, you do have a computer that is future proof, meaning it has a lot of memory. You can insert more slots to the memory, right? Let's say there are extra 3 slots to improve the memory, right? Next is meet customers' expectation. Again, the only way to have that service or product to add value is to meet the customer's expectation, right? Next, can IT support and maintain? We now have to check about the capacity of IT, right? Leveraging technology's additional capabilities, new risks introduced. Again, whenever we add a new technology or outsource something, we can basically eliminate and mitigate risks, but we also have to be aware and identify new risks introduced, right? Next are their automation capabilities. So this is very interesting if you're like a developer, right? You can automate stuff using bash scripting or Python, right? To automate some of the configuration for, let's say, development environment, right? Or release management. Partners and supplier scope, we do have to have service provider slash service consumer relationship. So not only with customers, we also have to have a relationship with suppliers. An organization's partner and supplier strategy, factors that influence supplier strategies, and service integration and management, right? Because we do have to integrate our systems with the suppliers. Okay. So factors impacting supplier strategy would be strategic focus, right? We have to know if that supplier has a good focus on what you're needing. Let's say if your supplier is for, let's say, let's look for a product here. Let's say using inventory management system, but let's say that's not their core service or their best service. So you want to rethink about that. Corporate culture, um, they might not be as customer obsessed as you, so you don't want that. Resource scarcity, again, the resources are limited. Cost concerns, if not only if it's very expensive, maybe the value is not right for the service provided or the product. Subject matter expertise, you do want to check their human capital if they are like industry experts, and check if they have been tried and tested in the field. And also external constraints, what are their limitations due to, let's say, international buyer and so on and so forth. And also their demand patterns, so they also need to demand something in return for their products and services. So value streams and processes scope, those are activities the organization undertakes, how activities are organized, and how value creation is ensured for all stakeholders efficiently and effectively. Okay. So for value chain, we first start with the demand and we do some planning. Then we engage, then we design, build, and deliver. And once we deliver that, we build basically the product and service, and that product and service should generate a value. And then we go back to the demand again, and once we go back, we now try to improve. We engage, design, build, deliver, and have, let's say, the version 2 of the products and services. So in a high level overview, 10,000 feet overview, simple process would be there's input, and input has some activities, and activities becomes output, right? So some of the questions we ask is, what is the generic delivery model for the service, and how does the service work? What are the value streams involved in delivering the agreed outputs of the service? Who or what performs the required service actions? And this is a summary. So we do have the four dimensions, and they have to basically give out value. And that's all for Module 2's lecture.
Okay, let's now start with Modulus points 2. Then we'll do some concept tests. So for Modulus points 2, let's check our student submissions. One is the article mentioned blockchain. As far as I know, the most famous use of blockchain is in virtual currencies such as Bitcoin. You are correct. Its value lies in its tax-free and anonymity. The value is more of like removing the middleman, right? So I want to know what is the role or value of blockchain in IT services. So if you do implement your IT services in using blockchain, you would have a stronger infrastructure. Um, Implementing blockchain though is a bit costly because you need more servers. You do need someone who has expertise in blockchain to maintain it, right? Um, I can actually give a quick presentation later after all the Modest points about blockchain. I think the most interesting topic is value streams and processes. Value flow and process are the most important of these four dimensions. Without this step, it is impossible to determine the value and effectively ensure the value creation of all stakeholders. So that's a good summary, Chris. Always think if there is a value. So if there's no value, so you might have to rethink your steps and basically change your structure or change your requirements so that effectively your ITSM does give value. How to carry out IT enabled services in cloud computing and database. Can you give me an example? So this one I can quickly show, right? So let's say Amazon, right? And not this Amazon, sorry, AWS. And in AWS, or let me check if we can also check out Alibaba Cloud. I don't have account though, right? So what we'll do first is maybe check out um, AWS, right? So this is enabling IT services through the cloud, right? So instead of us buying our own computers, right, and then maintaining it in AWS, you can do a elastic container, right, using the EC2, right? So with EC2, you can basically rent a server, right? And as you can see, they'll provide the infrastructure and you can even choose an operating system, right? So you can use a Windows operating system. You can use Ubuntu, which is Linux. Amazon has their own Linux as well, right? There is no Mac OS though, right? So this is one of the ways to have an infrastructure, right? And there's a lot of services. Let's say for database, you can have a RDS, which is relational database service, right? In this way, you don't need again to have a server in your own company. You can just connect it through your HTTPS, right, through that protocol, and you can create a database. For example, you can choose different types of databases. right? The PostgreSQL, MySQL, right? Microsoft SQL Server, right? So you only now need to connect your computer to the AWS cloud, and you'll be able to store data, right? And so we had some database, we have renting servers, right? We can also even do blockchain here. So this is way cheaper than implementing your own blockchain, right? Because they can provide the service for you. It's still costly compared to the usual other services, right? But it's still cheaper than implementing your own. Okay, so I'm now curious with Alibaba Cloud. I haven't really checked upon it, but as you can see, they also have elastic compute service, right? High performing virtual servers. You also have storage. Let's see, database as well. They do have PostgreSQL, SQL Server, MySQL, the popular databases. Let's see, NoSQL, Cassandra. Right. They also have blockchain as a service. Okay, so through this way, through going through a cloud service provider, you can basically have an IT enabled service, right? Okay, let's go here. What is IT enabled service? I think we already tackled that one. Is a service that is enabled through IT, meaning the service is made available if you have the IT, right? Meaning you need the IT for that service to work. Okay, so that's an IT enabled service. And again, most services does require IT. So you can say a lot of services are IT enabled services. Now, service providers can master the information of many customers, especially in the era of big data, and can give customers the most suitable solution according to the algorithm. Yep. So with machine learning, right, it can even know which type of what service or what solution to give the customer to make sure that the customer is getting the most efficient type of solution, right? Next is, however, on the issue of personal information security, many people are disgusted that their private information is stolen along with the fate. I don't understand with the fate. How should our user protect their information? Uh, this is mentioned during the cybersecurity class. Um, if you're the one implementing the service, you do make sure that you don't leak, right? You don't expose your customer data, right? So make sure you add encryption, right? When you store it in a storage or a database, right? You make sure that it is encrypted. Also, when you transfer data over the network, you also make sure that it is encrypted, right? Meaning it's not easily readable. I still don't fully understand this. Value is created when a service has more positive than negative effect. So they are using the word value, right? So do you have a value? So it is something positive all the time, but you can still use it as saying that, well, this implementation gives negative value, right? Or no value, right? So it's like when you have sales or revenue minus expenses, you have profit. Profit is always positive, and you can have negative profits as well, right? Or they call it loss, right? After reviewing this chapter, I have a new understanding of IT service management. Make sure you capitalize this one and realize that it seems to be implicitly related to information security issues. But I did not find the teacher's answer about the four dimensions model in this study. So my question is, what is exactly is the four dimensions model? So the four dimensions model tackles the four things we discussed a while ago, right? That it will generate a value. When we are now talking about the issues involved in, like, let's say, information security, right? This is a different part of ITSM where we now do incident management, event management, right? So that is part for a different topic. I wonder what is the difference between ITIL 4 and ITIL version 3, and what does ITIL 4 focus on? We did tackle that where ITIL 4 has the service design, service strategy, and so on and so forth, whereas ITIL v3 just have like two categories. So we can quickly check that. So ITIL 4 is more comprehensive, but we can quickly check that. And again, ITIL 4 did focus more on the processes as well. Let's see. So as you can see, ITIL 4 focuses on more value, right? The feedback, collaboration, optimize, and automate. Let's look for a more easy diagram to digest. Let's see if there are images. Mm, And they did change some of the names, right? A good example at the end here, it says piece of service design became dimensions of service management. Mm. And as just by looking at different images, we would know that ITIL 4 is more comprehensive, definitely, because again, this is ITIL is basically developed from the experiences of people in the industry, right? Okay. But also to answer if which one do you want to focus on, definitely learn both because a lot of industry are still using ITIL v3, right? Because ITIL v4 is recent, 2019, and not a lot of companies adopt very fast. From Sophia, I was most interested in the value stream of ITIL because I learned that value stream is specific process that runs through the service value chain, starting from demand, becoming value creation. Okay, there's only one ITIL for value chain, but each organization may have many different value streams, and these value streams may be completely different from the value streams in another organization. So this is a good reminder that ITIL is a framework, and each organization does have their own way to get those value streams or to implement that one. Okay, let's see if there's more. How does ITIL balance the relationship between consumers and companies? Definitely, they would first analyze which has more value, right, and which where they would focus on more. And at the end of the day, it's still the managers that would decide, right, to where to choose it, right? Most services today are based on IT and depend heavily on IT, correct? So, what problems might arise when considering the techniques used in the planning, design, operations of a service? So, let's say planning, right? If you didn't, if you weren't able to gather good information, right, or gather the requirements, you might end up with poor planning, right? And when you also did not define the scope correctly, right? So you would be starting it in the wrong way, right? In the design, when you are you let's say you do now have the plan and you design and you built the wrong architecture and built a lot of inefficiency. Let's say you did try to solve what's being asked, but you made it very complicated, right? You make it very expensive, right? So that could be a failure in design. Also, let's say your architecture has a lot of duplicates, right? So if it's for redundancy, meaning to make sure that the system is available, is fine. But if there are duplicates that you don't really use or has no use, that's also a problem. For the operation, uh, that's just basically how you use the system or the way you implement it, right? So if the user of or the one that does the operation cannot execute it properly, maybe because of again poor design or maybe because lack of training. So those are some of the problems that they would encounter. Okay, so again, maybe I copy pasted wrong with the name. Apologies. Does the organization have the appropriate skills among its employees and suppliers to support and maintain the technology? Not all the time, right? That's why they do outsource most of the time, especially when they are still a small or medium-sized company, right? Because they still don't have the resources to deal with everything, to support and maintain the technology. If it's an educational technology company, what kind of suppliers or partners should it look for? Many things, right? So let's say furnitures, right? That's a supplier. Um, let's say IT hardware, that's also a supplier, right? Let's say your computers, projectors, you do buy it from somewhere. Other types of supplier could be, let's say, virtual servers from cloud service providers, right? Um, More specific to educational technology company, learning management systems, right? So if you do in your university or your college, right, they also use a management system for class, right? In our case, in CityU, we use the Blackboard LMS, right, learning management system. So that requires skills as well to do integration, and we also have an IT staff to support that service and also an IT staff to enable the operations of Blackboard, right? How does service integration SIAM work? So we can check that quickly. ITIL, right? So for service integration, right? So when you do implement an application, right? Once you implement an application, you do have to integrate it with your different components in the system, right? And you do have to manage that, right? So you do basically employ people where most of their work is making sure that an application can fully integrate to another application, right? So an example would be, let's say you have a database, and let's say you have a customer relationship management system, and you do have to integrate them, right? So you do have to have some, again, there's planning, right? And there's some design and there's some operations for that, right? So again, it focuses on multiple suppliers of services, right? Yes, it does aim to integrate services from internal and external service provider into end-to-end services. So it's from the keyword integration, and someone just has to manage it, right? So this is from Linda. Let's say the four dimensions, okay, will result in a decrease in value or no value at all when when we don't consider, okay, when we fail to handle, okay, fail to meet expectation, quality, or efficiency. Okay, so that was just a summary. Okay. Does the service provider manage the IT infrastructure? Yes. Yes, they do. Um, Even if, let's say, the IT infrastructure is outsourced to, let's say, Alibaba Cloud or Amazon Web Services, you still need to manage portion of it. When I say portion of it, you still need to update the software or the operating system, right? So there's still some level of control or managing, right? How to better serve consumers um, using the ITIL framework, right? Making sure that you gather the correct information, right? Making sure that you design and implement correctly and gather feedback and keep improving and make sure it does add value. What is value stream? So Uh, this has already been tackled in the lecture where you have input and there's activities and output. Okay, so how is it applied? I'll look for some examples. Okay, we can get back to it next time. Why is it generally accepted that ITIL is only applicable to certain size or certain sectors? What benefit does effective service relationship management bring to service provider, organization, and consumers? Again, if you do have effective service relationship management, you would get a lot of efficient processes, right? You have more collaboration and trust as well, and those all of those do bring value, those efficiencies. And the first question, why is it still? Again, ITIL can be applied to all sectors. Okay, it's just that you do need to configure or change it depending on your own company needs, right? Okay, let's skip this. Okay, I feel that IT service management is inseparable from the part of information security. Yes and no, because you still need to have an information security team once you get bigger, right? But if you're small, usually the IT service handles the information security. Okay, I can figure out who is involved in the relationship between them. Uh, what do you mean by can figure out who is involved? Or is it a parallel relationship? So maybe the word is a bidirectional relationship where one needs to benefit from the other, or one needs to work for the other, and vice versa. Mm. Do let me know if you can explain this more in the chat. And that's the end for the muddiest point. Let's see, time check. So we'll be doing a concept test. And oh, I did say about we're gonna discuss about um, blockchain. Hold on. Going back, I did upload it here. So I can quickly discuss a blockchain overview, and hopefully this gives you more of an idea. I may just try to not really fast, but like don't go deep on everything because this is not really the focus of the course. So blockchain overview, right? It's the record keeping technology behind Bitcoin. Okay. So use of blockchain, we have cryptocurrencies, smart contracts, let's say automated escrow, right? So again, these are contracts, right? But it is built from code, right? Financial services and banks speeds up the back office settlements, video games as well, and supply chain, right? And you see the supply chain, right? So that's one of the ITSM, right? So blockchain is a distributed, decentralized public ledger. So there's a lot of terminology, right? We'll explain that. Allows block of information to be created and stored in a chain. That's why it's called blockchain. And it is a growing list of records, right? You don't you, you don't really reduce the records in a blockchain. So there are three things: centralized, decentralized, and distributed. As you can see in the image, the centralized is there's everyone has a single point of contact in the center. Decentralized, you do have different central nodes, right? And that makes it decentralized because there's not only one. For distributed, they are basically all connected to one another, like a peer to peer. So, levels of control, we do have the centralized and decentralized, right? Which I showed you in the graph. And differences in terms of location, there is non distributed and distributed. Okay, we'll give more example. So, let's say you have a Microsoft Word application on a PC running the Microsoft Windows operating system, right? So that is an example of a centralized and non-distributed, right? So why? Because Microsoft controls the application, it is centralized, and the application is located in your PC only. So it's only on a single location. That's why it's non-distributed. What if we have a decentralized and non-distributed, right? So it's a Linux on your PC with an open source word processing software, right? So why? Because Linux is built open source, it's decentralized. There's not one organization that holds it, right? It is open source, so a lot of developers all over the world is developing Linux or supporting Linux. And next, the application is still located in your PC. That's why it is still non-distributed. When we now have a different combination, centralized and distributed, let's say a cloud service provider such as Amazon Web Services or Alibaba Cloud, and they offer a data storage service, right? Data is shared and replicated on different machines. That's why it's distributed, right? Again, the cloud service provider may have many servers where they might distribute that data. It is centralized because only the cloud service provider controls it. Okay. Now, if we mentioned now, going back to the blockchain, right? It is decentralized and distributed. So example is Bitcoin, right? Because one, it cannot be altered by one entity, meaning maybe one server, right? Um and it runs peer-to-peer network. As we mentioned, distributed is peer-to-peer, right? And spread across the globe. Okay. So before we even go through blockchain, we have to talk about distributed ledgers. So distributed ledgers as a technology, they do not require a chain, okay? They do not need proof of work as well, okay? So an example, right, for the blockchain now is it is the technology that enables the existence of cryptocurrencies and other technologies, not only Bitcoin. So here's an example of a centralized ledger, right? Because we did show distributed ledger, so we'll talk about centralized ledger for now, right? So companies currently use a centralized database that lives in a fixed location. A centralized database essentially has a single point of failure. So if you see, let's say you have different banks and you just have one clearinghouse, right? All transaction goes there. So that is basically a centralized ledger. And if this goes down, everything fails because there's only one centralized database or ledger on that part. So when we now talk about a distributed ledger, it is basically now the database exists in all parts of the location. If we go back quickly, the database is only on the clearinghouse in one point or one entity. And distributed ledger, the database exists on all entities or all participants, right? And you can see the difference. So when we now talk about ledgers, there is public ledger, which is a public, an example would be a public blockchain, and a private ledger is a private blockchain. And as we all know, public is everyone can participate, and private requires an invitation. Okay. So example of a public blockchain is again cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, right? It is a finite resource, and participants in the network, which we called miners, are rewarded with Bitcoin tokens, and we do have the mining and the miners. So if you watch a Disney movie before Snow White, these are miners, and they try to mine diamonds, right? In our case, we in Bitcoin, right, in blockchain, the servers are the one mining, right? They are the miners, and they do mine the Bitcoin. So how does it actually work, right? So the servers for the one that holds the Bitcoin, right, generate really complex math problems, right? And the miners solve them. And the miners doesn't need to be a person. It most of the time it is a computer, right? If this miner solves the problem, it can mine the Bitcoin or get the Bitcoin. This is just an example of an application where you can see the amount of Bitcoin you got from mining. And we can skip this. This is just an interface where you can start mining and using your computer as a miner. Skip this as well. This is just a count. So first, the question is, how do you create the next block in a blockchain, right? So each participant in the network must solve a complex cryptographic problem, also known as a proof of work. Again, this is the complex mathematical problems we are trying to solve, right? Whoever solves the problem earns the right to create the next block and gets the reward. So if you have the blockchain like this, and a computer slash miner solves the problem, it can create the next block. Okay. So what are these computational problems? So when you think about math problems, it's not really just a simple maybe a plus or minus, right? It is generally an algorithm, right? It uses the SHA 256 hashing algorithm. So the miner has to basically decode this, right? And once it gets to decode that, they get the Bitcoin. Okay, so I won't go deeper into this or how to solve the next blocks, right? We can skip this, we can skip this, as this is not the whole point. Okay, we have mentioned this. Hold on. So we can just mention why is it so hard because it is resource intensive. So to solve that computational block, it requires a lot of it requires 2 to the 256 power, right? To solve the algorithm, right? The number of combinations possible. So it is basically this number, like I don't know what this number is now, like 78 digits of number or permutation or possible combinations, right? To solve it. And a lot of other miners do have like these data centers to grab Bitcoin. Okay, so we showed public blockchain and there's also private blockchain. Okay, also hold on, we'll relate this later to the supply chain, and we're gonna get there. Right, for private blockchain, we do have the Hyperledger Fabric. It's basically a product. Okay, it is called a permissioned blockchain. As we remember, when it's private, we do need invitation, and with invitation, you do need permission. Okay, so it is a service. Okay, so Hyperledger blockchain projects that are currently being used, food source tracking. An example would be usually we have a problem of, let's say, is the food, the vegetable, or let's say the chicken, is it really organic or not, right? We can't really verify for sure because, again, let's say the suppliers can just, well, let's say that it's organic, but it's not really. So they can fake the record or they can alter the record. But if you put blockchain there, they cannot alter the records now, right? So you can now see a history of that information for the food source. So which is also a supply, right? So this is part of supply chain management. Also, transparency on airline industry ticketing, traceable invoice to streamline accounting process, right? So again, this enables us to track all the history and make sure nothing is altered. Some examples of the public open, public close, private close, and private open. Uh, Public and open, an example are currencies, so Bitcoin, right? Public and close, we can use voting because the servers that can help that with the computation is basically invitation only. We don't want public servers to interact with the voting information. Private and open, right? So that is through invitation and also peer to peer, right? And that helps us with tracking food source. Private and closed, we don't want anyone to see it, right? And usually we use the critical infrastructures on that one. Okay. And applications of blockchains have a lot of things, and I think we'll just stop at this point. So as you can see, blockchain is basically an IT service as well because it enables you to do smart contracts, digital currency, record keeping, and securities. Okay, we'll stop at this point, and let's now go over to concept test. Let's hold on. So we're now on concept test 2, and I'll be placing it in the chat. Okay, so the correct answer is before that. So what can cause services to become undeliverable or not meeting expectation? So we have A, cost of service being too high. It is possible, yeah. Um, Risk not being removed, failing to address all four dimensions properly, and service introducing new risk. So these three are already included in the four dimensions. So C would be the best answer. So, but again, all of these are correct, but the best answer is C. Okay, let's just see some of the responses. And this is very true from Jeff. Cost is too high, nothing will succeed. And even if you are a very rich organization, you can do that, right? And maybe if you have money to use, you can do that and solve the problem and make sure after a while you do make it to be efficient or look for other vendors, look for other systems that are more inexpensive or cheaper, right? So you can still use it for dimensions. Okay, cool. Okay, for dimensions, for dimension. Okay, services introduce new risks. There's a certain probability that the whole service chain will be broken. Okay, possible. There is a residual risk that has not been resolved, blocking the server from running and not connecting, leading to situation mentioned in the title. Let's go back to B. Risk not being removed. Okay. Okay. Safety of delivery, unexpected. Okay. Okay. This should be all good. Um, all right. So time for where's this one? Okay. So I'll be sending this article as well. Um, I'll send the link and also the PDF just in case we are not able to access it. Okay, so now if you go through the Ding Talk, I've sent the link slash PDF, and I want you guys to just read about it, right? And after um, 30 minutes, maybe about 11:05, I'll start asking students, right, to come one by one. Uh, and then to make sure we do have some level of order, um, I'll be calling the following students. Hold on. But again, after that one, I might call more students. Okay, so I'll do this in batches. The first batch would be the students. Uh, can I copy that one? First batch, I'll call these students, and maybe second batch, third batch, fourth batch. So with the batches, so that somewhat helps me that if we didn't have enough time, we'll be cutting it off by batch. Okay, so use the remaining time and read, and I'll ask some questions there. And let's be back at 11. I'll give you guys until 11:10. Okay, I'll say be back at 11:10 a.m. Keep reading though. Okay, I'll see you guys in a while. Um, and then what I'll do now is I will cancel the group video chat and I'll just call Dr. Dong maybe at 11:05 to check if we can connect properly. Okay, so I'll see you guys later.